This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Mateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. A second and final day of high-stakes US-China trade talks. Investors optimistic for a breakthrough in the British capital, especially after US President Trump signaled that the negotiations with China are going well. The first call between South Korea's new president, Lee Jae-myung, and his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, both leaders committing to stronger economic ties and peace on the Korean Peninsula. Well, Japan says it's tracking 2 Chinese aircraft carriers sailing simultaneously in the Pacific. China insists its naval presence near Japan is lawful. Now, a $30 billion buyout bid overshadows events at Toyota Industries AGM amidst shareholders' criticism of the proposed plan. Also in East Asia tonight, do you hate to go on vacation on your own? Well, you are in good company. More and more young people in China are turning to social media to hire travel companions. A dynamite day for the BTS army. 2 more members of the K-pop supergroup complete their mandatory military service. The stars promising a reunion soon. We are going to kick things off with our top story today, and that is China having a second round of trade talks with their U.S. officials. We've got CNA's Tan Si-hui now joining us live from Beijing. Well, Si-hui, today's talks have just started, I believe. What can we expect?
Well, the second day is on the way with no deals made yet on the first day, but it appears that export control measures, restrictions are still going to be the focus, as we've seen top commerce officials involved in talks from both sides. But analysts are saying that negotiations are going to be thorny as export control measures. They range across diverse areas. We're talking about EVs, jet engines, as well as the restrictions on AI chips. And so there's going to be an added layer of complexity to these talks, especially since China is likely to use these rare earth export controls as a strong leverage to pressure the U.S. into easing restrictions on AI chips. And so far, American companies are already feeling the heat. According to a latest survey by the American Chambers here in China, they surveyed more than 100 companies here. Although a small number of companies are affected by the rare earth exports, they say there could be potential severe impact, with about 75% of companies saying that they're going to be running out of running out of supply of rare earths within 3 months. And there's so much uncertainty about the licensing applications. And also, they're saying that the American companies here in China are not going to exit. So that is an optimistic sign. They're saying that they're going to localize operations and possibly move productions to third countries, but they reassured, saying that they will not leave China. In fact, they're not going to move productions back to the U.S. either.
So quite a few thorny issues to iron out. Well, Trump has indicated that talks so far are going well, but what is Beijing's stance on these talks, and does China share that same positive outlook on the outcome?
Yeah, that's right. So far, there is no official comment from either side yet, but it appears that the U.S. appears more optimistic, with comments by the director of the National Economic Council saying that immediately after the handshake, export controls with the U.S. will be eased and rare earths will be released in volume. Meanwhile, on the Chinese side, 2 op-eds by Communist Party mouthpiece The People's Daily were published today. One commentary stating that China has legitimate rights to safeguard its own natural resources, and that it has approved a number of applications for rare earth-related exports and says that it is ready to engage in dialogue with other nations. Another commentary saying that U.S. export controls on high-tech products harmed America's own companies, adding that the U.S. has politicized trade issues. But China did say that it hopes both sides will achieve mutually beneficial solutions. So analysts are saying again that China views these issues as these talks as a way to emphasize that all these issues are interconnected. And Beijing has already made clear that further non-tariff measures would be seen as violating the spirit of any agreement.
Hey, thanks a lot for that report. CNA's Tan Si-hui speaking to us live in Beijing. Now, one of the sticking points between the U.S. and China is Washington's vow to aggressively revoke visas of Chinese students. The White House has also been trying to bar all international students from entering the U.S. to study at Harvard. But that move has now hit a roadblock. The U.S. State Department has ordered diplomatic posts around the world to resume processing Harvard University student and exchange visitor visas. A judge has issued a temporary restraining order saying that visa applications should no longer be refused, effective immediately. Consulates were previously told to reject visa applications for students and researchers looking to study or work at Harvard. Mr. Trump has cited national security concerns for that decision. Now, the White House has also frozen billions of dollars in grants and other funding for Harvard and is seeking to end its tax-exempt status. The Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for stronger ties with South Korea, urging both countries to respect each other's core interests and keep relations moving on the right track. In their first phone call since President Lee Jae-myung took office last week, Mr. Xi stressed that a healthy and stable relationship between the two countries is key to regional peace and stability. The Chinese leader also called for deepening cooperation from diplomacy to economic security, highlighting the need to safeguard supply chains and boost coordination as friendly neighbors. In response, Mr. Yi shared his hopes to expand the two countries' cultural and economic exchange. He has invited Mr. Xi to the APEC summit, which Seoul will be hosting in November. Now, ties between the two countries have steadily improved since a diplomatic rift in 2017 over a U.S. missile defense system deployed in South Korea, a move Beijing strongly opposed. China remains South Korea's largest trading partner, and Mr. Xi stressed that a strategic cooperative partnership would benefit both economies and bring more certainty to a volatile international environment. Japan says that it has spotted 2 Chinese aircraft carriers operating in the Pacific simultaneously for the first time. This comes after Tokyo said over the weekend that Chinese aircraft carrier Liaoning entered its exclusive economic zone. It said that China's Shandong aircraft carrier, along with 4 other ships, including a missile destroyer, sailed inside Japanese economic zone yesterday near Okinotori, which is a remote Pacific atoll. It observed fighter jets and helicopters conducting takeoffs and landings. Japan believes China's military is trying to widen its capabilities beyond its borders. Defense Minister Gen Nakatani said that Tokyo's prompt reveal of the carrier's movement will help to deter any forceful unilateral shifts in a regional status quo. Beijing again dismissed Tokyo's concerns today, reiterating that the activities of its warships complied with international norms and that the country has always pursued a defensive policy. But the heightened activity has unnerved some of its neighbors. According to security documents and officials, China has been flexing its muscles since May, sending an unusually large number of naval and coast guard vessels through East Asian waters. Japan's Agriculture Ministry will soon release another 200,000 metric tons of rice from its emergency stockpile. They're trying to bring down those prices, which have remained stubbornly high since last year. The latest release will go to retailers of all sizes. Long queues have formed outside the stores as consumers snap up 5-kilogram bags of stockpiled rice. Now, these cost about $15, roughly half the price of the non-stockpiled equivalents in the market. Still, average supermarket rice prices have fallen very slightly to $29 as of the 1st of June. That's down by about 30 cents compared to the week before. The government has released 600,000 tons of the stockpiled grain. That's 2/3 of what it has reserved for emergencies. Well, the price of the staple grain is a major concern for Japanese consumers, and policymakers believe it could impact elections in Tokyo this month and nationwide polls in July. Now, time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, South Korea's president makes good on campaign promises to legalize stable coin. But the Bank of Korea shows some resistance. Hello again. It's time now for some business news. Toyota Industries management team faced a tough crowd of shareholders as the leadership tried to placate investors over a delisting proposal. Well, Roland Lim is standing by here and he joins us with all the details. Roland?
Thanks, Oteli. Toyota Industries has held what could be its last annual general meeting as a public company. This as a $30 billion buyout bid overshadowed the AGM. Investor confidence, however, not boosted during today's meeting. Shares of the firm falling 0.58% for the day. Parent company Toyota Motor, which is helming the buyout, meanwhile seeing a reverse of fortunes. It's up 0.2%. While the issue of the takeover was not on the agenda, many stakeholders were seeking answers and clarity behind the acquisition and why the offer does not represent the intrinsic value of the company. The world's largest manufacturer of trucks and forklifts say the meeting was the longest in its history, with also the most questions posed, I should say, by stakeholders. The issue also expected to be raised at Toyota Motors AGM later this week. The proposed buyout of Toyota Industries is a deal that, if successfully executed, will be one of the largest in Japanese corporate history. The deal would resolve Toyota's complicated web of cross-shareholdings and a parent-child structure, in line with the government's efforts to encourage big companies to unwind cross-held shares. The complex $33 billion deal includes investments from Toyota Motor, Toyota Fudosan, and the chairman of Toyota Motor himself. The group will also borrow up to $21 billion from financial institutions to finance the transaction. Altogether, their investments will help establish a new holding company to privatize Toyota Industries. But a deal of this size does not happen without controversy. The planned tender offer of 16,300 yen per share was a significant discount to the market price when it was announced, and some argue is below the intrinsic value of the company. Critics also worry that the founding family will now have even greater control over the business empire. Amongst those opposing the deal, investment firm Oasis Management, which owns a stake in both Toyota Motor and Industries, has called the deal offer unfair. Chairman Akio Toyoda has defended the deal in an online video clip posted last week. Toyoda, whose great-grandfather founded Toyota Industries, denied that the plan was an attempt by his clan to tighten its grip on the business. He also stressed that the price on the table was a premium to where the stock was trading before the news broke. Toyota Motors will be holding its shareholder meeting on Thursday.
Japan's so-called parent-child structures coming under the knife, and minority shareholders are up in arms about this deal. Well, here to tell us more, Roland once again. So investors have used some pretty harsh words, basically calling the deal shameless, saying that the price undervalues assets and tramples minority rights. I mean, these concerns, are they valid?
Well, in a nutshell, yes, they are. As to the undervaluing of the shares, the offer price, $16,300, that's a 12% discount to the last traded price on Monday. The other thing is that external appraisals say that the fair value of Toyota Industries is around 18,000 to 24,000 yen per share. So that is taking into account its steady cash flows as well as Toyota Industries' prime real estate assets. But remember, Japan has weak minority rights protection, not like the US, not like the EU. Japanese law has made it easier for these companies to do a buyout, and in this case, to squeeze out the minority stakeholders, because this is a so-called two-step tender plus merger structure, which actually just needs 42.01% of the voting shareholders to actually approve the deal. I mean, you'd expect 50%, right?
Right. So what does that mean? I mean, does that mean then that the activists, they can realistically block the deal?
It's going to be very, very highly unlikely. I'd say almost impossible, because where does the voting power lie? Well, it's Toyota Fudosan, which is controlled by Toyota Motor, Toyota Industries, and their various respective suppliers. They all hold more than 50% of the voting rights as it is. So to get the dissenters to try to convince these 50% or more stakeholders to vote down the deal, that's going to be highly unlikely, especially since the $16,300, even though many are claiming is below its market price, it's still above the share price of Toyota Industries before the news broke.
Right. And this is also all part of the wider government and Tokyo Stock Exchange initiative to basically unwind the parent-child listing. So what's exactly driving the regulators here?
Well, there's two key motivations. One is capital efficiency, because if you think about it, cross-holdings, complicated cross-holdings actually lock capital for these non-performing affiliates. So what the regulators are trying to do is to make sure that these so-called underperformers are then either hived off or sold, so that the cash can then be reallocated to the better performing units, or better still, be returned to stakeholders as either share buybacks or cash dividends to the stakeholders. And the other thing is market discipline, because once you have these sprawling industries in very complicated share structures, what that also means is that management themselves are actually at a loss to try to have total external oversight. So forcing these companies to divest, forcing these companies to consolidate means that they are better at focusing on profitability as well as strategy. And before I forget, this has precedence, because if you remember back in 2022, Hitachi, when they consolidated or broke off their 90-plus listed companies, its share price actually tripled. So Japanese regulators are hoping that will happen for a lot of these conglomerates.
Okay, so looking ahead, what is next for Tokyo-listed corporates?
Well, Tokyo Stock Exchange are about to tighten the rules so that minority stakeholders have more say. So there's going to be a flurry of buyout offers before beginning of July. That's one thing. And we are also expecting industrial giants like Nippon Steel, Sumitomo Chemical, as well as Aeon. These are also facing similar consolidation, and we might be expecting deals within the next 6 months or so. So these two factors, the minority stakeholders, enforcement of laws for a lot of these companies, as well as these big conglomerates, also working out management buyout offers. So many more deals to come.
All right. Well, thanks so very much for enlightening us. Roland, I believe you've got more business news for us.
Yes, I do. South Korea's new president wasting no time making waves in the crypto world. Just days after his election win, President Lee Jae-myung is pushing forward with a campaign promise to legalize and to support stablecoin issuance by local companies. Now, stablecoins are cryptocurrencies pegged to another asset, usually a fiat currency like the US dollar. His party is proposing the Digital Asset Basic Act, allowing companies with about $370,000 in equity to issue stablecoins. Now, all issuers would be overseen by the Financial Services Commission. South Korea already boasts one of the world's most active digital asset markets, with over a third of the population involved and daily trading volumes often outpacing its stock exchanges. Still, there's resistance. The central bank, the Bank of Korea, warns that stablecoins could threaten monetary policy and wants stricter controls. And of course, memories of the Terra USD collapse back in 2022, where $40 billion vanished. That's still fresh on the minds of investors. Taking a look now at major cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin is currently up by 0.67%, more than 190,000 apiece. Ether also up nearly 4%. Greater China markets ended lower as investors await details on US-China trade talks, negotiations continuing for the second day in London. Stocks gave up early gains to close in the red. Shanghai Composite is down 0.44%. Second most, the Shenzhen component down by nearly 0.9%. And the benchmark Hang Seng Index flat, 24,162 points. Some observers speculated that a commentary listed on a social media account affiliated with state broadcaster CCTV may have impacted sentiment. It urged the U.S. to realistically view progress made and to revoke negative measures against China. The remarks added that Beijing is earnest about trade talks, but is at the same time principled. Saxo's chief investment strategist Charu Chanana says that investors should look beyond tariffs and trade concerns and focus on opportunities in sectors like technology instead.
Certainly, I think right now, these US-China talks are top of mind for investors. I think some of the sound bites that we got yesterday during the US session were a little bit more positive, I would say. There were things like, talks are progressing well. And I think just the broader signal around the fact that nobody walked out of the room and the talks continue for a second day as well. I think those are some of the positive indications that we are getting out of these talks. But I think we've had a lot of this to and fro, right? I mean, high tariffs and then some talks to bring it down or to postpone them, put them on pause and things like that. I do think the market is a little bit desensitized to these kind of conversations right now and somewhat more focused on fundamentals. So from the US side, we've had that strong jobs report out on Friday. And I think that is really what is creating that momentum, the upward momentum that we have in the markets right now. And the China-Hong Kong markets as well, we did see that lift coming through yesterday and over the last few weeks and months as well because of that growing tech momentum and the private sector innovation focus on that front. I think these are some of the fundamental stories that the market is now trying to focus back on and stay away from the noise of tariffs and talks around that.
Huawei founder and CEO Ren Zhengfei said that his company's semiconductors are still lagging behind those of the US. Now, it's his first known remarks on the Chinese tech giant's chip-making efforts, which have become a major flashpoint in US-China tensions. Mr. Ren Zhengfei told Chinese state media that America has exaggerated Huawei's achievements and that the firm is one generation behind in terms of single-chip output. Although the Huawei founder seemingly dismissed the impact of U.S. export restrictions on China, he noted that the firm can get results if it wants with cluster-based computing. Now, that's a reference to running artificial intelligence training on a group of chips. Mr. Ren also mentioned that he chose not to dwell on difficulties and to get the job done when asked about America's export controls. The remarks were published as American and Chinese officials meet for the second day of trade talks in London. Easing tensions over the shipments of tech are among the matters that the teams are expected to talk about. U.S. chip curbs have made it harder for semiconductor giant NVIDIA to sell its products in China. As a result, the firm has been losing out to domestic players, including Huawei. NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang also recently warned that Chinese AI rivals have become more formidable. And that'll do it for Business. I'll tell you.
Thanks so very much for that, Roland. Right, time now for another short break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, a former U.S. defense official calls for an official defense alliance in Asia with an eye on China. But will such a move gain traction? We'll be speaking with an expert for some insights. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. A second day of high-stakes US-China trade talks. Investors optimistic for a breakthrough in the British capital, especially after US President Donald Trump signaled the negotiations with China are going well. The first call between South Korea's new President Lee Jae-myung and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, both leaders committing to stronger economic ties and peace on the Korean Peninsula. And Japan says it's tracking 2 Chinese aircraft carriers sailing simultaneously in the Pacific. China insists its naval presence near Japan is lawful. Is there a need in Asia for a collective defense pact akin to NATO? Well, a former senior U.S. official thinks that Washington needs to band together with its closest partners in the region to counter the threat from China. Dr. Eli Ratner, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Indo-Pacific, says that Beijing is close to having the capability to shape Asia by force. He argues that a defense pact is essential and says the U.S. could start with Japan, Australia, and the Philippines. The four countries are already in an informal grouping known as the Squad. Dr. Ratner says the modernization of the Chinese military means true deterrence requires a capability that only a collective defense arrangement can deliver. Mr. Ratner sees a demand for American partners to contribute more to peace and security. He stresses that existing frameworks are too informal to provide credible deterrence, but the idea of something like an Asian NATO has raised eyebrows among security experts. For more insights, we now speak with Ken Jimbo. He is Managing Director of the Dialogue and Policy Research nonprofit International House of Japan and also professor at the Faculty of Policy Management at Keio University. Well, thanks, Professor, for joining us this evening. Now, I know that you have been pretty open about your thoughts on this proposal. You've described it as premature and misguided. Share with us about some of your concerns and why you feel that way.
Yes, I do have a huge respect on the Eli Ratner for his service at the DoD and also academically, but I disagree because the fundamental problem is that the Indo-Pacific region lacks the strategic cohesion necessary for NATO-style pact. Unlike Europe, where there's NATO, which shares the common threat perception and the joint commitment on the defense, Asia is far more diverse. And even among close allies like Japan, Australia, the Philippines, there are stark differences in how they view China, what they are willing to risk, and how far they are willing to defend. Under that constraints, I think what worries me more is that China will exploit if these asymmetries of the interests among those allies of the United States, probing for hesitation within the fact and using that to fracture regional solidarity. And that will undermine the deterrence rather than strengthen it.
But, I mean, even if you disagree, do you see that there is more, perhaps whether it's strategic or operational benefits of this proposal as opposed to a broader Asian NATO?
Yes, I do agree with many of the aspects that the Eli has laid out, including the increasing needs for the defense exercises and, increasing the upgrading the interoperability with each other, and also to have a more common platform for the defense industry networks. Those are very much needed in order to standardize the operation in order to counter those, including those Chinese assertion in the region. But that will really undermine the cooperation if there will be the formal pact to commit themselves inside the mutual defense agreement. Take an example of how the Philippines can do with, Japanese concern over the Senkaku and how Australia can really deal with the Taiwan contingency. There have been the gradations of the willingness and commitment to each of the, hotspot that we have in Asia.
Right. And would you also say that, I mean, it is a challenge, isn't it, that we still don't quite know what Trump's Asian security policy looked like, given the current apparent instability in his administration's approach?
Yes, in the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, mentioned that there has been there will be a continuity rather than the differences under the Trump 2.0 administration. But he specifically mentioned that his role is to expand the decision space for the President Trump. And decision space, what he meant was to including the tough action by the president, or the range of the option that includes the negotiating with China on the various aspects. So that I think in terms of how that the allies can really, engage United States into their defense commitment, there will be the role for the allies to help the United States to expand its decision space, but doesn't mean that the maximization of the U.S. commitment in the region.
Well, earlier you talked about, in the event that such a defense pact were to form, there is a possibility that China will exploit, some of the countries within Asia and cause that fracture. Can you just elaborate a little bit more and give us some examples what you mean by that?
Well, yeah, I think that China, doesn't need a new trigger to, build up its military, for example, so that I don't really think that those kind of defense pact will trigger the renew the arms race by China. What I concern is that China will exploit the weakest link of those defense pact. For example, they try to, exploit the U.S.-Japan security cooperation. We know how to deal with that. Rather on the Senkaku or in the East China Sea, there will be a kind of playbook how to deal with it. But what about the Philippine-Australia ties, Japan-Australia ties, and then we commit formally that we are defend with each other, and China exploit whether that is true. If we cannot really operate that kind of cooperation, China may verify that the defense pact is not working. And if that is not working, that will lose the credibility of even the United States commit to each of those alliances.
Right. And when it comes to rare earths, these are rare earth elements that China controls most of, right, when it comes to the mining and the processing. And do you think that this could also become some kind of a serious bottleneck for any of the collective defense plans?
Well, I think it's a very complicated agenda. It is much more on the geoeconomic side rather than the geopolitical side. But certainly that reliance on the certain project on China, especially on the excessive reliance, which China can utilize it as to weaponize the dependency level of each country. And that will definitely create the notion that the China will utilize as a counterattack against any of the conditions that the China may utilize it. So that I think it is very much interlinked with each other. But I think it's the debate can be sided with how much that the defense pact can be multilateralized.
So, Professor, what sort of signs, whether it's diplomatic, military, or something else, would you be looking out for to know that the region is really starting to come together on collective security?
Well, I think that there has been a lot of a commonality in the platform for each of those U.S. allies and partners to work together. For example, Japan and Australia has been working on the cross-acquisition agreement, that is the logistics support for each of those military operations. Also, reciprocal access agreement, that's a legal status for each services to utilize the facility. And that will enhance the joint exercises with each other. And that kind of legal relationship can now be extended to Philippines as well. So certainly there has been the constant upgrade of the military to military relationship among those partners. So that is important in the kind of building block way. How can, those militaries can interact with each other? And we do share the common agenda. We do share a common operating picture, but that can be most effectively work if we are not committing to the formal defense pact that will constrain the commitments among ourselves.
And we have also seen, sort of political chaos, whether it's in South Korea or Japan, these sort of domestic political changes. Do you think that also would somehow impact the viability of a collective defense pact in Asia?
Certainly. I think that during the Biden administration, what has been, at stake is the growing so-called minilateral cooperation, something going beyond the bilateral one-by-one cooperation. We do have Japan, Korea, United States, Japan, Australia, United States, U.S., Japan, Philippines. Those kind of different sets of the triangle try to kind of benefit each each end of the countries in order to create the complementary security cooperation with each other. Once that is institutionalized, that could be more durable to the any kind of democratic political change that might take place. Without such kind of institutionalization, there will be certainly the victimized to be influenced by the change of the leadership of each government.
Hey, some great insights there. Thank you so very much for your time and thoughts, Ken Jimbo, Managing Director of the International House of Japan and also Professor at Keio University. French President Emmanuel Macron says that the international treaty on the high seas is expected to gain enough support to take effect next year. He was speaking at the United Nations Oceans Conference in Nice, where the head of the UN said that humanity is failing to protect the world's marine environment.
Nations are now addressing navigating new waters on seabed and seabed mining. I support the ongoing work of the International Seabed Authority on this important issue. The deep sea cannot become the Wild West.
The High Seas Treaty focuses on the conservation and sustainable use of maritime areas beyond national jurisdictions. Leaders at the conference are also discussing contentious rules on seabed mining and terms of a global treaty on plastic pollution. The drive for nations to turn years of promises into real protection for the oceans comes as President Donald Trump pulls the U.S. out of key climate initiatives. Some European governments are also trying to weaken their green commitments. The world's oceans cover 2/3 of the planet, but less than 3% are under some form of protection. The treaty aims to protect, ensure responsible use, and fair access to ocean resources for all countries. Oceans are vital to coastal economies, supporting livelihoods through tourism, fishing, shipping, mining, and offshore energy. They also provide a vital buffer against climate change by absorbing 30% of planet-heating carbon dioxide emissions. In other news, firefighters in South Korea battled to contain a blaze that broke out next to the historic Buddhist Chugae Temple in Seoul. Well, the fire at the Central Buddhist Museum was first reported just before 10:30 a.m. local time. Around 36 fire engines were deployed to the scene, bringing the blaze under control before noon. More than 300 monks and officials were safely evacuated from the affected building. No injuries or casualties were reported. Firefighters managed to prevent the flames from spreading to the temple's main hall. The affected building, though, held some of South Korea's national treasures, but officials have confirmed that the artifacts were not damaged. The cause of the fire is being investigated. Now, just before we go for a break, here are some stories from media outlets in East Asia. Yonhap News reports that more than 70 kilograms of drugs have been seized in a joint operation between South Korean and Thai authorities between March and May. Seoul attributes the surge in drugs from Thailand to the kingdom's legalization of cannabis. Kyodo News, quoting a Japanese government report, says the nation lags many countries in addressing gender equality and that efforts will have to be stepped up to ensure women have more opportunities to participate in decision-making. And Radio Television Hong Kong reports that inclement weather is headed for the city. A cyclone is developing in the South China Sea and is expected to bring rain to southern China later this week. The Hong Kong Observatory says it could issue a standby storm warning signal as early as tomorrow. And coming up on East Asia tonight, would you pay a stranger to be your travel companion? We find out why more young people in China are willing to fork out good money for that. Plus, K-pop's ARMY goes wild on the release of more BTS members. A direct train service between Russia's Moscow and North Korea's Pyongyang is set to resume next week. It was put on hold since the onset of the COVID pandemic more than 5 years ago. Well, the service runs twice a month. The 8-day journey covers 10,000 kilometers, making that one of the longest direct rail trips in the world, and will also make some stops at major stations along the way. Separately, a shorter service linking Pyongyang and Khabarovsk will restart 2 days later. The two countries are also linked by freight rail networks. Well, the resumption of services comes amid deepening ties between Russia and North Korea. They are timed near the 19th of June, which marks the first anniversary of their comprehensive strategic partnership treaty. A new type of freelance work is gaining popularity in China. It caters to the young, busy professionals who struggle to find travel companions. And at the same time, it addresses a growing economic challenge. CNA's Tan Yu-guan explains.
Shi Jinping traveled nearly 2,000 kilometers to visit mainland China's only Disneyland park. Sharing the magical moments with the 23-year-old teacher from Shenyang isn't her partner or friend. It's someone she hired off social media.
朋友的话，他们的工作有的时候不太方便，如果一个人玩的话，就觉得有点无聊。然后就是想找一些人，然后带我一起玩，这样还挺好的。有人能说说话，陪我一起玩什么，就像朋友一样。
Yunling is part of a growing trend of young travelers within China hiring so-called Dipei or local companions for their holidays. Her Dipei today is Chen Ziping. He's a 21-year-old student, but has been a local companion at Disneyland for over 4 years now.
来迪士尼可能会觉得大家可能都是2、3个人出行，那或者说闺蜜啊、情侣出行，他一个人可能会觉得还都有些无聊，就还不如去花点钱去找一个陪玩，找个地陪过去陪他一块玩。
Hao Yue is also a part-time local companion. She feels that meeting new people via this gig can open up her horizons in ways that her job at a media company cannot do so.
在公司平时也接触不到什么新人，我就想着出来做做陪玩，交交新朋友。看着他们做一些东西，可能就会学到一些东西。就比如说，我前段时间有个客户做金融的，当时他就跟我说了一些金融里面的事情，就感觉学到挺多的。都行。
Hao Yue charges 80 yuan per hour or 500 yuan per day to bring her clients around Shanghai to snap a few pictures and sometimes dine with them. Fee is about a quarter more than her average daily pay as a media worker in Shanghai, a first-tier city with the highest wages in China. With the youth job market weak and wages depressed, why are young people in China so willing to splurge on a local companion?
A survey by the Fudan Development Institute on the spending habits of young netizens could provide some clues. The 10-year study found that young netizens are far less interested in spending on big-ticket items like cars, houses, and renovations, but are far more willing to spend on food and entertainment items that provide instant emotional gratification.
Time crunch is possibly another factor. Employees in China with 1 to 10 years of service get as few as 5 days of leave, making young people more willing to spend to get most out of their short vacation. The time crunch is even more acute in a theme park like Disneyland.
园区这么大，我可能也有的地方有的项目会找不到，他就会精准的帮我去找到这个路线，什么时候排队的人比较少，他都比较清楚。
Disney provides its own VIP tour service with fast passes that skip queues, but at a price that's up to 9 times the fee charged by unofficial companions. For fresh graduates like Cai Xiaoying, that price difference has made being an unofficial companion at Disneyland a viable full-time job.
我的本专业是现代物流管理，之后发现不适合自己也不喜欢。然后当时有一个朋友就说这边可能有个什么样的机会，然后让我过来试一下。然后当时抱着玩的心态，我说大不了我就是当玩半个月嘛，然后就过来了。然后但是做起来就发现其实还不错。
Despite scammers dragging down the profession, business is thriving, and the clientele now includes couples and families with kids. For Ziping, he's even roped in his schoolmate to help him out. and hired an assistant to take bookings and run errands. He hopes to go full-time when he graduates.
我跟我爸妈去讨论过这个问题，我跟他们商量过，因为目前的收入是可观的，并且呢，可能国内大学生毕业之后就业率很低，他可能找工作很难。
其实是有发展的空间的，因为迪士尼肯定是会越来越好的，然后我们跟着他们一起发展，肯定有机会有很多。
Shanghai Disneyland has been expanding with new zones and rides, while Legoland will officially open in July. It comes amid a resurgence in domestic tourism in China following the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, Chinese travelers made more than 5.6 billion local trips. That's up 15% from a year ago and near the peak of 6 billion trips made in 2019. Tan Yu-guan, CNA, Shanghai.
Next, an update from the world of K-pop. Fans of supergroup BTS are rejoicing after another 2 members of the boy band completed their mandatory military service this morning. Well, that's RM there playing the saxophone and V holding on to the flowers as fans greeted them upon their release. They are the 3rd and 4th members to be discharged after Jin and J-Hope. The remaining 3, Jimin, Jungkook and Suga, will also be released later this month. The group plans to reunite this year and promises to release new music soon.
공연 이제 하고 싶습니다. 빨리 앨범 열심히 만들어서 또 다시 무대로 복귀하도록 하겠습니다.
이렇게 군대를 기다려주신 아미 여러분들한테 정말 감사하다고, 정말 진심으로 정말 감사하다고 얘기를 드리고 싶고, 일단은 조금만 더 기다려주시면은 저희가 정말 멋있는 무대로 다시 돌아오겠습니다.
Around 200 fans gathered in Chuncheon to catch their idols in the flesh. BTS is one of the first K-pop acts to make it big on the global stage. Some of the fans here came all the way from Turkey, Brazil, and Mexico.
Fue una travesía muy difícil, fueron casi 18 horas de avión, pues lógicamente a las que uno no está acostumbrada, pero se los juro que eso se nos hizo nada, es por la ilusión de estar aquí en la salida de los chicos, por la ilusión de estar en Corea del Sur, en las ciudades natales de nuestros chicos que amamos, que adoramos.
And that wraps up East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia, and you can also look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.